Hello, welcome to the Horus Heresy. That's a terrible start, but I'm going with it. I'm not reshooting it. I'm driving the chat. Today we're going to be looking at how vehicles work in the new Horus Heresy. Again, a special thank you to everybody. We're now up to, we just hit when I recorded this video, we've hit 3,000 subscribers on a YouTube channel, which I expected to get about 50 views per video. So I'm kind of actually a little bit confused and scared, but I hope you're enjoying the videos. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. I guess technically 27,000 to go so that we get to 30K, but kind of weird. Anyway, a special thank you. Thank you for all the comments, etc., etc., etc. Right. We're going to be looking at how vehicles work in the Age of Darkness. Right. Vehicles work differently to infantry. If you're new to the Horus Heresy, as an example, the Horus Heresy and also kind of like older editions of 40K split the game up so that infantry works kind of how you think infantry vehicles work now in current 40K. But vehicles were definitely a different thing. They have hull points, and they're very much designed structurally different or intentionally different, which I think is good game design ultimately. Because we talked about weapons earlier, and the video I did about weapons, and someone made a really good comment in one of the YouTube comments talking about AP values and how if I have AP 3 and you've got an armor save of 3, you don't get an armor save. And I said maybe I would have liked to have seen it switch to a different system. Because like if you have AP2, then you've got 3 up save, you would then now have a 5 up save. Like it will reduce your armor save. But someone made a really good point, actually, that it creates a nice distinction of line where you will never give like units that have very like weapons that have very high AP lots and lots of shots, whereas something that's got low AP, maybe you give it lots of shots as a kind of like it's nice to break it up. And it's same for vehicles, and vehicles having hull points and being different as well. It's a nice way of like being able to separate out their survivability, but also the destruction that you can wreak upon them, which I think makes a lot of sense. And ultimately, they're not people or Space Marines. Space Marines aren't people either. Anyway. So, vehicles in the Age of Darkness. Tanks, Knights, and Titans are all subtypes of vehicles, and therefore use a different stat line for your foot-slogging troops. Some models that might seem quite vehicle-y. I actually love that. I kind of want to be, like, I like vehicle-y. Ooh, he's put on a bit. He's a bit vehicle-y. That's what people say about me. Anyway, meanwhile, included dreadnoughts are treated as bigger, more resilient infantry, so you don't get the different stat line. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I talked about in an earlier video is scale. Having stuff that works at a different scale to your baseline stuff means that it's really hard on D6 to be expressive with rules. And hopefully with this version of Horus Heresy, 14 stat lines, you think that they're clearly going for being more expressive with rules, right? Shout out to everyone who made sure that I knew the term ludonarrative harmony, which I already did talk about in another video, but whatever. Right, for example, the most common kind of vehicle, the tank, which I actually don't think is the most common type of vehicle. Surely it's a transport. Never mind. Retains the movement and ballistic characteristic, but the other stats are now replaced with armor values that govern its front, sides, and rear arcs. The wound statistic is also replaced with more vehicle-y appropriate hull points in a system that will be familiar to current players and a little bit confusing if you're new. That's really fair. So if you are a seasoned veteran player, let me know in the comments kind of what you think of this whole thing. And if you are someone new, let me know what you think about them having different stats. Is this something you think is good? Is this something you're not sure about? How do you feel about it? So this is a Predator, and a pretty well-painted Predator as well. That looks pretty nice. Its front armor is obviously 13, side is 12, rear is 10, which I like this. I've always liked this. Shooting something in the rear, it's easier to do. Great. And you can see it's got hull capacity of 5 and transport capacity of nothing. When they're shot at, the attacker must first determine which part of the vehicle they're shooting at. Whether it's the front, whether it's the armor, it's usually strongest, or the sides or the rear. If the attacker hits their shot, they're on. Well, also, this kind of like front, side, rear thing, I guess this is a point of contention, right? That can happen in games, which, you know, it would be nice to clearly have conversations about this. You know, ultimately, the vehicles are all weird and funky shapes. So working out exactly where the shape is, like exactly where the arc is that the rear, is that the flank, I don't know, but you know, that is a point of contention that can come up in games. If the attacker hits their shot, they aren't wound and save rolls to determine damage. Instead, the attacker makes an armor penetration roll by rolling a d6 and adding the range strength of the weapon, which we covered in the weapon charts. Fail to match the target's armor value in that area, and the shot simply plinks off. If you manage to equal the total, you score a glancing hit, while exceeding the armor value results in a penetrating hit. So you either just do a glancing hit or a penetrating hit. Super simple. And obviously, like, immediately you start talking about, okay, well, if I've got something that is strength 7, the most I can ever do by rolling a d6 is I can score a glancing hit. If I am strength 6, I can't even score a glancing hit on the front. However, if I get in the rear, even being strength 6, I can create a penetrating hit in the rear. I do know what I said out loud there. I hope you don't have this out on loud at work. But sure, you can use lower strength shots to penetrate the rear, which is useful. Right. What's new? Unlike previous editions, however, glancing hits don't automatically strike off a hull point, which is what they used to do in the past. Okay, instead you get to roll on a table to inflict random tactical status, impaired sensors for stunned, broken motors for pinned, and weapon damage for suppressed. Now, I thought it was quite interesting that there seemed to be a lot of upset by the status effects that we talked about on the status effect video. A lot of people were saying this is too dense, this is too much information, this is too many of the same things for the same effects doing the same thing, right? Anyway, I quite like there being status effects, so I quite like this as well. Also, it lets you put little tokens on stuff. If you're one of those hobbyists that's crazy and magnetizes stuff, you can pop things off, and that's all really fun. So looking at the table, you can see that on a 1 to 2 impaired sensors, the model gains the stun status. On a 3 to 4, the broken motors, the model gains the pin status. And on weapon damage, the model gains the suppressed status. If a model that already has a specific status would have that status applied again, then they lose a hull point at that point. So that's quite interesting. And unlike infantry, who can test on their fancy new characteristics to remove a status, vehicles must make a repair test in the status sub-phase or be repaired by specialists like Tech Marines if they get hit with the same penalty again, and then they lose a single hull point. What I quite like about that is you can obviously have some vehicles that are much better at repairing themselves than other vehicles where it's harder to repair. That's a good kind of breadth of rules writing in space. I will talk a lot about... I will talk a lot in these videos about design space. Also, just as an FYI, oh no, I'll talk about that later. I'll talk in another video. But I'm really excited about all the rules right now because genuinely no one knows how it plays. So I'm not being a doomer about it. Once you put it on the table, and if something doesn't work very well, I'll say it doesn't work very well. But right now, I'm just excited about there being design space and designing rules inside of it, which is good. Penetrating hits simply deal the weapon's damage value straight to the hull points, and vehicle is destroyed when this total reaches 0. To make sure the tanks aren't blowing up too quickly in this new era of multi-damage weapons, they've also had their hull points bumped up across the board. The Predator, for instance, goes from 3 to 5. The real question will be, is that enough? That's genuinely the question. Is that enough? With multi-damage weapons, is 5 going to be enough, or they're going to generally need to tweak it even more in the future? The thing is, there's something that's complex, and yes, Games Workshop have the money to be able to playtest these things, but they don't. Maybe that won't be enough. Maybe it's too much, and they'll be very hard to kill. This does mean that the old vehicle damage chart is no more, but it lives on in spirit as much of its functionality, such as reducing accuracy and impairing movement, has moved to the glancing hits table. Vehicles are now more durable in general and less prone to inappropriate critical hits. Obviously, and it's a great kind of sentence to make and then show a picture of knights. Knights are this thing that really polarizes rules writing, and I talked about this earlier with extremes, right? With the scale of the game. With things like knights, you end up being you have too many hull points. You're too tough. You're too difficult to work in a normal size point game. That becomes a real problem. And talking about the fact that they're more durable makes you worried. Actually, what if knights are too durable and they just kill everything on the board? Well, now we move on to a section about knights and titans. These war engines use similar rules, albeit with a few twists. Knights are far more capable of fighting close combat and often have gigantic melee weapons, so they also retain weapon skill, strength, initiative, and attack characteristic, while their greater ability to react to incoming fire means they only have front and rear armor facing. Super simple. And here you can see the front, though, of this knight, 13, is no tougher than the tank that we saw earlier, which is decent. That's good. They're not given like an uber level of toughness. They do have 10 hull points, however, but you hope the points adjust for just how effective they are. Titans, on the other hand, operate very differently, and there is an entire chapter of the Liber Questoris book dedicated to them. Rather than having various armor facings like tanks, they have several locations where their own armor values and hull points can be independently targeted. I love this. I absolutely love this. This is great. I like that you can shoot off like the weapon of it, their head, and reduces how effective it is. Shoot the leg so it doesn't move. Shoot the arm so it loses its weapon profiles. This is fantastic. It's so fun, and it really adds a kind of like, you know, it already gives you ideas for how you can do battles. Like I could bring my Titan, you could bring a bunch of solar orgs, and you just see how long it takes to like bring the beast down, do a monster hunter style thing, which is super cool. Have a bunch of different Titans in a Titan battle. I know there's like the Titan groups that love battling each other, shooting each other's body parts off as you know, they get more and more wounded. That's super cool as well. You could even write some additional narrative rules on top of that for like if you do an ongoing campaign where in the first battle they had to have their head replaced, so now they're like -1 to something. There's so much that you can do here with expanding out what they have versus having just like a, you know, it's got a lot of wounds. It works the same as infantry, but I think that's fantastic. Reducing the hull points of a location to 0 doesn't outright destroy a Titan, but rather cripples that location, causing further attacks to roll against a lower armor value and causing devastating internal damage. Rolling, which is great. I think that's great. Rolling the Titan critical damage table will result in the loss of an entire weapon, collapsing to the ground, or even mortally wounding the princeps, while a particular stroke of fortune could detonate its reactor in spectacular fashion. We can't go into all the Titan rules here, but the changes come together to make their deployment a real event for players and an exciting challenge to overcome. Such majestic engines of war are gradually chipped away as they thunder across the battlefield, fighting on through the damage that would crater lesser vehicles for a more emerging victorious. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you don't think that that's awesome. And again, scale is an issue in wargaming design. Primarchs is an example. Like when you scale them into a game, they're just so much more. They're so much better than you have other units. Heresy is kind of really lucky in that it gets to generate its own baseline scale in a marine. And sure, you've got solar orgs and mechanicum as well, but you can just go, cool, that's our baseline. So we can have stuff that's a little bit weaker, and then we can have a bunch of stuff that's much bigger. And then you can obviously put them in different points value games. I think that's really good. And then having it so that there's these structural design points, so you can do all these other things with how you play your games and how you build your missions is really fun. There's a lot more to see, including a new system for flyer combat assignments that make aircraft more engaging and interactive. There's actually a whole system for infantry assaulting Titans. Okay, this is super exciting. There's a whole system for infantry assaults against Titans, in which valiant troops climb all over the enormous war machines and desperately probe for weakness while the crew fight them off. You can even dispatch jump pack equipped space marines to attack the head in close combat. Fantastic. All of that's fantastic. It sounds fantastic. Obviously, we're reading hype articles, right? And I'm someone who gets excited by these things. I'm reading them out. It might not work in principle. Like, the rules might not work, or the jump pack infantry never does enough damage. But they've given us the opportunity to think up a cool idea and engage with it. And if it turns out that the jump pack infantry can never do enough damage, you just beef them up, or you make the thing that they're attacking a little bit weaker, or whatever it might be to make it work. But that is super fun. I love that. I think that's really great. So yeah, I like this. I think as a refresher for people who don't really know about vehicles in the Horus Heresy obviously will be a big deal. And they've got such an esoteric amount of vehicles as well. You've got all of the Titans and the Knights and all of those. You've got all of the tanks. You've got so much stuff. I think taking a bunch of stuff like dreadnoughts and just saying, right, you're just bigger infantry, really helps create a nice barrier between the two different like sections of the game that they're trying to like organize, which I think is really positive as well. So ultimately, I'm really happy about this. I'm sure there's a veteran who's like, well, in the Horus Heresy 2.0, this happens and this isn't as good as this. And fine, fair enough. I really appreciate that you've been playing the game for a couple of years, and I'm just re-jumping into the game now after Horus Heresy 1, which is when I played. And I'm trying this whole thing again. But currently, this all sounds fine to me because ultimately, I haven't played it. When I play it and start putting it down, I'll be like, it's a bit lame. I'm always getting broken motors. Or, actually, I feel I could do with a couple more hull points. Or I could have less hull points, actually. And it's really tough to get rid of them. We, as of yet, don't know. So I'm very, very excited to see kind of how it all works and give it a try. So I'm looking forward to this. Vehicles are very fun as well. I just picked up the new, I really like the Kratos assault tank. Kratos assault tank. So I've picked that up for my salamanders a couple of days ago. In fact, that's my little treat for myself tonight. I'm going to go build that. That's one of the coolest tanks I think that's out there at the moment. I think it looks very, very nice. So looking forward to painting them up. And painting tanks is also a real big challenge as well. So I'm looking forward to like watching some tutorials. And if you've got any suggestions for good tank tutorials, I'm a huge Cult of Paint fan. They do great Heresy paint jobs. So if you've got any ideas for like, this is a great person who always paints tanks really well, drop them in the comments. I'd love to see that. Thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you soon.